Welcome everyone to the Preschool Neuroscience Summit. Today I'm really excited to introduce you to a very good friend of mine, someone that I really admire and have worked with for many, many years, Elmarie Potgieter. She is coming to us from Malaysia today. She's the founder of the Right Education Group. She's always and winning awards and doing wonderful things. She won the 100 Meaningful Business Award in 2019. She's a really global educator who's worked all over the world and brought huge change to many, many countries over the past 2 decades. She's an amazing speaker. She's just so thoughtful and has so much knowledge and advice and is always willing to share, but she's really a specialist in the area of creativity and thinking skills and emotional intelligence. She has just, well, by the time you watch this conference, she will have just finished her own conference, which is called the Inspired Conference, Are You Future Ready?, where she's looking at what's happening in the future of not only schools and education, but business and financial institutions and so much more. So as I said, very qualified and interesting person to speak to. So welcome, Elmarie, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you for that really amazing introduction. It made me blush. Thank you so much for always inviting me and for the collaboration. It's very interesting, the whole field of neuroscience, and I think it's something both of us have always, from the start, been quite interested in, way back when we started our work together in Abu Dhabi. So it's exciting to see the developments in the field and how it has become much more acceptable, much more embedded in teaching and learning, but I think much more needs to be done to embed this in teachers' understanding of how the brain works. So thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. I think, things are moving along, but I think we've had discussions about, why is this not taught in teacher training school, or why aren't parents taught these things? So I also just wanted to mention that if you click on Elmarie's speaker link, we have links to all of her social media and websites. She has a wonderful program called Think Wise, Little People, Big Ideas. If you're in the MindBE group, you might have heard me talking about it before, and she's given you a free resource called Explore Chameleons with Lucy Luke. So you can download that for free and have a look at it if you want. So let's start by talking about the kind of focus on thinking skills. And I know that you always bring this into, even when I knew you in Abu Dhabi, you are doing so much training about thinking skills and the brain. And so what got you interested in that kind of area in education?
I came from a very traditional schooling in South Africa. We sat in rows and, we memorized and learned for the national exams. And I started my teaching career, and I was very, very lucky to be introduced into the whole world of cognitive education by a principal who was really a person who looked into the future and looked ahead and sent us on all kinds of training courses. And that's where I, getting very, very interested in the brain and the early research. And of course, that was quite a long time ago. So at that point in time, many people thought of it as, it's just, this is nonsense. This can't be proven. But I just said, no, this is something that makes a difference. I started implementing the strategies and techniques that I gained from attending so many training courses in my classrooms. At that stage, I was the teacher, head of department, and I could see the difference that it made to those children in the classrooms, especially in the students who were in the so-called underperforming groups, when suddenly they could access visualization, when they could learn in a different way, when we introduced mind mapping and, you know, things that were so, at that stage, very much out of the normal way in which teachers were teaching. So when I started my own company where I started also really advocating these ideas and strategies, and I moved to the Emirates. And when I was there, I was very lucky because it gave me access to people. You know, I went to America. I studied with so many, at that stage, the gurus in the field, and just kept up learning about it and applying it in the professional development frameworks that I developed for Abu Dhabi. And it just built my own belief because I could see the change, I could see the importance of it. And ever since then, I've just embedded that knowledge of the brain, of how does learning happen in the brain, how do we build that into the actual practical everyday teaching and learning. And that has underpinned every single thing that I've been doing for the past, wow, don't want to say aloud how many years, but yes, you know, for the past 2 decades, you know, so I really believe in it. I've seen the impact not only in other people's lives, but, you know, not only in teachers' lives, but also the lives of school leaders, of children, of teachers, of colleagues, and myself. So that is where the passion came from, Helen.
Wow, that's really, really interesting, Elmarie, and I love how you explained kind of how things have been evolving and how you brought that into your own classroom. And I think a lot of times when we're teaching, that's how we just know that things work, right? Without having to, like, we personally see that this is working with the students that we are in touch with, and then kind of maybe later the research actually comes out finally saying yes, this is something that that we should be looking at. So yeah, I think teachers do a great job by trying things out and seeing what works in their own classrooms, and then sometimes research might be a little bit later than than us trying it out. What would you? Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to say that the important thing for me is, and I think it's in anything that you want to advocate or implement, is that you first have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
You have to experience it yourself so that you really believe in it, because it's just this, you can't tell people what they must do without actually also showing them how they can do it. And that is something that I find in teacher education is a really big problem. So many teachers are told, you have to have a more mindful class, you have to embed social and emotional learning, you have to teach children how to think, but, you know, and they could give them theories, but they don't actually help them to translate that into the everyday practice. And I think that is a big, big gap in teacher education until today, you know. So that, I think, I've always been a very practical person. I always ask myself the question, so, you know, can people take what I'm talking about into their own classrooms and apply it the next day? You know, is it, or in their own lives? And if it fails that test, then you know that this is not going to work, you know. So that, just wanted to share that.
Yeah, and I know just how focused you are on, you know, taking action and getting those things that really work into the classroom. If you follow Elmarie on her pages, you'll see all the really practical stuff that she's doing with schools all over the world. So let's talk a little bit about the Think Wise program. So I know you spent a lot of time finding the evidence and the research and backing everything up before developing this program with the neuroscience of young children. So tell us about what kind of things you found that supported your Think Wise program.
Yes, so as part of my attending training courses in the US and reading about neuroscience, and as the new research came out, it was very interesting to me to see, as what you said before, what we sort of knew intuitively, to see that it's backed up by science. And I, as you said, I've been teaching thinking and the development of thinking using thinking frameworks, using visible thinking structures, using scaffolding, looking at stuff that De Bono did, the court program, Ron Richards' work from Project Zero and Visible Thinking, as I've said, and a lot of other things that I've been using with older people, with older children, with teachers. And I said to myself, well, what neuroscience, it's so true when you look at the findings that's coming out for young children, that the intervention should happen at a younger age. It's even though we know, plasticity is there and brains can be rewired, it is much harder and much more difficult when you want to introduce or change the thinking patterns of older children and people, students. So I thought, okay, so let me see whether what does the neuroscience say in order to support what we believe works. So it's almost a backward design that we followed. We said, well, we see this works, so what is the scientific proof for this? And this, there are a few things that supports from neuroscience. It supports what we do in our ThinkWise program. And I think the way to explain that is I'll give a 2-minute explanation of how we approach the program, and then I'll go to this neuroscience. So we the children, the teachers, we give the teachers and the parents 10 thinking structures. These structures build in complexity from easy to harder, from a very simple approach to just asking children, well, why did you say that? Or tell me more about it, to get them to start developing that metacognition, to reflect on their own thinking and to not just say something, but to talk more about it, up to a very inquiry-based approach. So from Mary Moore that says, tell me more, right up to Peter Puzzler, who looks at inquiry-based, think, puzzle, find approaches in, and we then structure that and it builds in complexity. So when we then started looking at the neuroscience, because we know children are naturally inquisitive, right? Children are, they are naturally creative. They are naturally thoughtful. They are imaginative. They have a natural motivation to learn. What happens to them? And I don't know if you know about the study of George Land, where he developed the NASA test for creativity. Oh, yeah. And he tested, I think, 180,000 children. So he developed this test to see who should NASA appoint, who are those creative people? How can we find the right people to, because they have to do all this problem solving and have to come up with a lot of creative solutions. And he then said, well, can we test children? They tested 5-year-olds, and 98% of the 5-year-olds passed this test of creativity. But as they went and they looked at children as they grew older, that percentage dropped. So when it came to 12-year-olds, so they tested them at 5 and then at 12, and then when it came to adults, only 2% of adults could pass that test. So what has gone wrong? What happens in the brain if we know that we are innately creative, we have innate the talents in that we have, that we could be that creative? Is it the education system? Is it the environment to which we are exposed? And those were questions that I wanted to have answered. And that's where we then, said, well, what can we say? Because we know that, and this is what we found in the neuroscience, we know that children's brains develop at an astounding rate, right? So, and these neural networks are created as a result of their experiences, of their interactions with others. And they make sense of the world through play, exploration, social interaction, and they gain deeper knowledge and understanding when they are encouraged to make those connections between different aspects of their learning. And therefore, we said, well, okay, so what can we do? How can we help? What do we know about those neural networks? How do we know about the structure that develops? Are there sensitive periods in the brain that would support the intervention at a young age? Those are the kinds of things that we explored and that we found in our research. So we know that children's brains are in their most dynamic state of change from the age of 5 to 7 or 8. And this is when children begin to develop symbolic thought, when they begin to interact and deal with formal systems such as words, maths equations, mental images, for thinking and remembering. And the neuropsychologists call this the 5 to 7 year shift. 5 to 7 shift, because so much change occurs in the brain during these years, and with as much as 85% change in the brain areas for language and spatial awareness. So our program is also focused on children from the age 4 to 7, when a lot of these neural networks are developing, when pruning happens in the brain, and the basis for more complex networks are formed. And that was what really made me say, well, okay, what if we introduce these visible thinking structures, these structures for thinking at an early age? What if the children were to use these structures over and over and over again? Because the brain will prune what it doesn't use and will form those stronger neural networks, the myelination occurs, and maybe that would then form a sound structure or basis for the development of brain architecture. And that's what we did. And that's how we then came up with not only choosing these 10 thinking structures, but also connecting that with a character, because then it helped the kids with making very abstract thinking more real, more concrete, seeing characters, seeing those kinds of situations, play-based situations and inquiry-based situations that we've created in lessons, where they would be using these structures over and over and over again. And I can give some examples, but this is a little bit, I mean, we can expand more on this, but I hope that it begins to answer your question.
Yeah, no, definitely really, really interesting. I love the example you shared of the NASA research, and really we need to ask, why is that happening, and why are we losing all that kind of creative thought at such a young age? So I love what you've done. We've got lots of people here in the MindBE community, and they'll know the characters from our program as well. And I think the way that the ThinkWise program runs is very complementary to that, and has a lot of the like similar elements. So we'll post the link in here if you want to look into that as well. But Elmarie, tell us a little bit more about what can parent, like, knowing this, that creativity kind of is diminishing, and that this is such a crucial time in a person's life, and this limited kind of time period before things change. What can parents do to help their children learn thinking skills at home?
You're quite right to say that there's such a alignment between what you're doing with the mindfulness, the social and emotional intelligence, developing the emotional skills of kids, because we know that emotions drive thinking, and metacognition and awareness and thinking about your own thinking is so important for kids. So there are many things that parents can do. And it's very interesting because there's a quote from the Nobel laureate, James Heckman. And I don't mind sharing my slides or, some information with the audience later on. I can also show a graph, maybe just now. But this James Heckman wrote that the greatest returns on education investments come from nurturing children's non-cognitive skills, giving them social, emotional, and behavioral benefits that lead to success later in life. And I think that's where parents' investment in their children, where it comes in. So obviously focusing on a safe environment, making children feel that they belong, that they are listened to, is so important. And I'm worried about this life of busyness that we have today. Parents are on their mobile phones, they are distracted. They say they don't have time. That's been an experience that I have. I don't know if you've had that same experience. When you talk to parents, they say, well, I don't have time. It's the school will teach my child. But I believe there are these amazing golden moments. Even if you are extremely busy, you go shopping. You do sometimes sit in front of the television with your child. You do travel in the car together. You do visit friends. You do go out, and you can use these opportunities to just think about how you listen, the kind of questions you ask, the kind of experiences that you give kids. As a parent, rather than spend money on an expensive Lego set, spend time with your child and exploring nature. Go for walks in nature. Ask them questions. So one of the structures, for example, is see, think, wonder. It's a visible thinking structure. And we have a little character, Winnie Wonder. And Winnie will always ask, what do you see? So a parent can use anything. You can use a storybook. Use just start by showing the storybook, or it can be any pictures. It can be from your old photo albums. It can be an object that you have in your house. And say to the child, what do you see? And let them just explain what is it that they see. And then to ask them, so what do you think about this? So I see a book, I see a young boy, I see a crocodile, I see the zoo, whatever it is that you want to explore with them. What do you wonder about it? What do you think about it? And then what do you wonder about it? What are the questions that you have? And you will be surprised just to hear what comes out of those conversations, especially when you have built up that awareness of kids. I wouldn't jump into that immediately. I would start with a program where we start with Mary Moore that says, tell me more, getting kids to say more. Why did you say what you were saying? As they get more comfortable to think about their thinking, a structure like this, for example, you can do anywhere. You can do it in the shops. You can do it, as you're driving or when they, see something on television together. So you as a parent can do so much. And the structures really help because it gives you more of a scaffold. It gives you, because if somebody were to tell me 20 years ago, teach your child how to think. I mean, I don't know about you, Helen, would you have, how does one go about it? And so many parents feel lost. So that's what we've scaffolded. We've created these STEM structures with activities for parents that can help them. But the most important thing is listen to your child. Let them ask better questions. Help them to ask better questions. Help them to develop empathy for other people. Develop their emotional intelligence through giving them the emotional vocabulary, because that helps them. So that's some advice that I have for parents.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And yes, as you said, sometimes like we don't know where are we supposed to get this information. And I love the parenting cards that you have that you can just pull one out and use that in one day to think about how you might teach your child to ask more or ask better questions. And things like when you're out shopping, you can take the shopping card and it has all these really practical things to do with your child to build up their thinking skills and their curiosity. So we know, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. You know, the National Scientific Council on the Developing Child, what they said was, you know, young children are capable, and as you know, you work in the preschool area, you know, so much with young children. They are capable of deep and intense feelings of sadness, including depression, grief, anxiety, anger, and also intense feelings of joy and happiness. And you know, by the end of the preschool years, children who've had who've developed a strong emotional foundation, they have the capacity to anticipate, talk about, and use their awareness of others and their own feelings to manage their everyday social interactions. They can express their feelings better, feelings of like shame and pride and guilt and embarrassment. And I think these things are so important because we see a rise in suicide in young children. And I think this is where parents, to come back to what parents can do, is really focusing on helping children to think about their emotions and equip them with a vocabulary of their emotions, because it plays such an important role in, and as we've seen through the science, the neuroscience, where what you focus on is what you retain. The more you use certain structures, the more you use certain language, the more you use certain patterns of behavior, those become the neural or the foundation of your neural network. So I think it's so important that parents also think about the modeling that they do, the models that they are for their children. And in this time of COVID, you know, having children, keep them away from television. I don't know if you agree with me, Helen, on this, but don't let these kids see these images and hear this stuff over and over and over and over again, because my fear is what will be the long-term consequence, because these brains are being shaped all the time, isn't it? So if they hear or they live in an environment of fear all the time, what will be the long-term the long-term implications on their brain development? So we have to be very aware of that.
Yeah, I think such an important point, and it's like an unprecedented time in the world, and sometimes we, you know, forget about you know, what our kids might be hearing and seeing, and it's so important to, you know, I think, to kind of be honest, but, you know, in a child-friendly way, and make sure that what they're hearing is appropriate for their age, and that they feel safe and secure throughout it all. So Elmarie, tell us a little bit about the brain, and we know that it needs routine and it also needs novelty. So tell us a little bit about that and how that's incorporated into the ThinkWise program.
Yes, so for a child, I mean, a child feels safe when there's structure, right? So, and you should always have a good balance between the structure that you create for a child and the novelty, because the novelty would be the different, you know, that's the excitement versus the rules and the structure that gives them a feeling of safety. And this is for me the balance of this is what forms the basis of what we do. So we teach the 10 thinking structures, which gives the routine, the structure, the sort of the safety net, the steps that they have to fulfill. Every teacher knows that in a classroom, routines do help. Routines for collecting things, routines in the morning. It gives a child a sense of safety and emotional safety. So the 10 structures will teach you certain steps that you follow in your thinking, like see, think, wonder, or Kenny 5 always asks 5 questions, now 6, think, who, what, when, where, how. But it's the content that you fill this in with, that's where the novelty comes in. So when you have a structure like, let's say, for example, Lucky Luke, and I've shared that with the audience as a freebie. So Lucky Luke, the whole thing about that structure is teaching kids the difference between seeing detail and seeing the big picture. So that is an important skill to develop in your own thinking, is to be able to zoom in and zoom out, see the bigger perspective, and see also what it looks like when you focus only on the detail. So that would be a structure that you could follow. I look at the detail and I gradually see more and more and more of the picture or whatever it is that I'm looking at that's revealed, and then I reflect on the changes in my thinking. So in our program, we provide, for example, a picture book with large pictures that the teacher covers and lifts up a window and let the children think and say what they think they are seeing. So, it could be an elephant, and you reveal a small piece of the picture, and they will say things like, oh, it's a tree, it's a lizard, it's a snake, it's a rock. And you would note that down. And as you reveal more of the picture, their perspective changes, and they then begin to realize, hey, wait a minute, what I think I'm seeing is not always what the big picture is. So where does the novelty come in? A teacher can then change a lot of these pictures that they're showing kids, or they could do it in so many creative ways. So for each of these structures, you can do this, and we provide examples through literature, nature, exploration, doing science experiments, doing going for walks in outside, interviewing others, working with others, learning from others. So that's where the novelty comes in, and that keeps kids engaged, because engagement is essential for learning, right? So that's when kids are really engaged and interested in what they're learning, that's when flow happens, and it's in that state of flow in the brain that the best learning happens, right? So it's always that balance between structure and novelty. Too much novelty will make a child feel very insecure. Too much structure will create a huge amount of stress. So I think that's how we view that, and the link to the needs of the brain.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for sharing all that. So just before we finish today, is there any last message that you want to share with our viewers about neuroscience, or about your Think Wise program, and what we can personally do to help children in this area?
I think one very, very important thing for people to understand is how the brain develops basically from, young child's brain develops from the back to the front. So the first area to develop is the occipital lobe and vision, and then eventually, it goes to the parietal lobe and hearing area, and then motor, and then the prefrontal cortex is the last bit to develop. And it's important to understand how children's brains develop, and that you don't expect them to be able to do things that they are not fully ready for. So that is why it's so important, I think, for teachers to learn about the brain, about the development, and that parents also don't put demands on their children that they're not actually ready for. So I think that is an important thing. Don't measure your child against others. Measure your child. Okay, think about the age of your child and what is most likely happening in their brains, but each child is also unique. And that's the other thing that is important to understand, because the friend can read doesn't mean that your child has sufficiently developed, so that you put all that neurological stress on your child to do things that they're not necessarily ready for. The other thing that I think is really important is to understand that there are these sensitive areas or periods in a child's brain. And I will share this with you, that you can share with the audience afterwards. And they call it like windows of opportunity. or sensitive periods in the child's brain. And between basically, you have to be aware that there are these sensitive periods for language development, for mathematical skill development, and if you don't pay enough attention for emotional skill development to that in that period, it will be very, very hard to acquire those skills later on. One very interesting study that I read was it was an orphanage in Bulgaria, I think. I'm speaking under correction, can't remember which country, but these were orphans who were never exposed. Nobody ever talked to them, and they really struggle to acquire language. If you don't speak to children, if they never hear language by the age of 2, they might never be able to acquire language. And our ThinkWise program is targeted in this very, very sensitive period of pruning and brain development between the ages of 4 and 7. And as parents, I think it's just so important to be aware of this, to read more. In our program, we give a lot of information on in very digestible way on how the brain develops, how important it is, what you can do, and to take this into consideration. So for me, that is important. It's important to let children play, and that self-directed play is so, it's crucial for a child. And also to understand the impact of executive function and self-regulation. And, there's a lot of stuff that people need to know, but they can read more about this in our program. We have a theory and practice guide that gives this information as I said, in a very digestible way. And we also have videos in which we explain this. But I guess the lesson is learn more about it, learn about the brain, learn about neuroscience, embed this in teacher training programs. As a teacher, learn more about it, because you can never teach the same way once you understand what is going on in a child's brain.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Elmarie, for sharing all that research and practical things that we can do with children, both in and out of the classroom. And as I mentioned, we will have the links. Recommend that you follow Elmarie on social media. She's always posting interesting things that are happening in the education world, and download the freebie with her link, and you can learn more about the program. But thank you so much for coming on the summit and sharing your time and resources and knowledge with us today.
Thank you for having me here, Helen. It's been a great pleasure.